What is up, guys? Before we get to today's exciting and thrilling 200 Zoom session, I want to talk to you about a course that is dropping on Carrot Corner this Friday, the 16th of December. Cash Injection is a 10-episode long exploitative roadmap to punishing the opponents at your stakes for all of their leaks. Cash Injection is a bit of a cheat code. It's kind of a hack. It's like saying, how do you improve your win rate dramatically right now in the short term without having to ingest a ton of poker theory? Of course you want to get good at theory eventually. We're very big on that here at Carrot Corner, as you know, but that is not the goal of this course. Everyone that's ever run a successful coaching group or stable or staking business knows that the best way to get quick results from your students, to get them beating micro and low stakes as fast as possible, isn't to overload them with poker theory, although we do want to build that gradually. It's to actually get them playing in a really effective way that exploits the ranges and imbalances that their opponents are playing with every day. You can do so much better than what a solver tells you can do, and Cash Injection will bring you 10 recipes for success in 10 common spots that are going to transform your game. You can check out the syllabus over at carrotcorner.com right now, and of course, if you're watching this after Friday the 16th of December, you can grab the course and then come right back and check out this chaotic 200 Zoom session. Let's get to it. What's up, guys? I just played a completely insane, totally chaotic, action-packed session at 200 Zoom, and I'm going to show you just the best bits right now, the really big pots, the stacks flying left, right and center, big bluffs, big calls, me stacking people, me getting stacked. This session has it all. Let's get right into it. Let's fly through as many of these hands today as possible and do it in a really instructional way that's going to help you guys master cash game poker. You know the idea of this series by now. So this is going to be a really fast session. I'm not going to be dwelling or pulling up sims or anything like that today. Just going to be going over my thought process at the time and showing you guys loads of fun spots. So in this first one, we have ace-4 offsuit. We're in the small blind and we open against a strong reg. I'm actually going to turn on the screen names here so I can remember who was who. This player I didn't really know. I did know that they were a regular. So on 9 deuce 3, blind versus blind, single raise pot. I'm mixing a bit of check and a bit of bet with this hand. I would say that I'm betting overall with my range here. Probably something like 50-55%. My hand is going to bet slightly more often than that, I think, being a wheel ace with a pretty good straight draw and overcard, and not as much showdown value as some of the bigger ace-x in my range that would check more often, like ace-7 or ace-8. So we bet and we get raised. I think you can build some 3-bet here. I think you can also call. In terms of like your overall range, you do want to be 3-betting this flop a lot, because you're going to have hands like kings or queens or whatever, which out of position do want to rush pot growth. We should understand that for the small sizing, villain is raising a bunch of 9x and other hands of that nature, so you can definitely get a little bit aggressive here with your value 3-betting and throw in some bluffs as well. Ace-4 I thought actually had quite a lot of showdown value on many runouts and wouldn't even need to bluff by the end of the hand. For example, if the runout goes deuce 7 or something like that, we can just check river with ace high and bluff lower down. So I thought I would call this one and turn some of the other lesser showdown value hands into 3-bet bluffs. The turn was an ace, which led for a really standard check call. I don't really see anything else we can do here. We do have positive blockers to 4-5, and then most importantly, we seem to unblock pretty much every bluff that villain could have left here. The 4 of clubs is even the best 4 that we could possibly have, because if they are raising us on the flop with something like backdoor flush draw, backdoor straight draw, queen 4, jack 4, king 4, 10 4 suited, then they're unlikely to be clubs. They're going to have the backdoor flush draw. So the ace-x with the club is actually going to be the best suit of 4 that we could have. The 4 is about the best rank of card we could have when bluff catching here, because clearly 4-5 is a lot of villains value combos, especially if they have the offsuit variants. They may not. That depends on how they're constructing preflop. Villain jams the river, which looks like the right sizing for their deuces, for their 3s, for their 4-5. And again, because we basically unblock all of their bluffing range here. Okay, we block 6-4 of clubs, I should like point that out, but they don't have 6-4 offsuit usually on this node. We unblock all of the other missed sort of jack 10 of diamonds, something with a 5 in it, like king 5. I guess the most likely bluffs at this point aren't jack 10 of diamonds, because that probably gives up turn, theoretically. I just don't think we have any reason to do anything but call again with these really positive blockers. We're going to have to call over bet shoves here with some of these one pair hands, and we need to pick the ones with the right blocker. So I think there's a big difference here between choosing something like ace-4 off with the 4 of clubs and then ace-6 off with the 6 of hearts. I think the 6 of hearts would be a much worse card to have. It doesn't block 4-5, it blocks 6-5 offsuit, and it's the wrong suit in that it would block the backdoor flush draws that raised flop and continued blasting off here. Villain shows up with the 5-6 off and we win this one. I think both players played this hand completely fine. Pocket ace is now in the button and we go for a small 3-bet. Villain 4-bets, and this, my friends, is meant to be played as a slow play. Whether you should actually jam here depends on the type of opponent you're up against. You do need to remember, as always in this series, that what we really care about is true EV. And in pursuit of true EV, one of the things that matters here is player type, another is timing. So if the player is someone recreational, passive, nitty, bad, probably you just want to jam. If you play this hand live, you probably want to jam against most people who 4-bet you, because they will 4-bet you way bigger than this, which will already just make more dead money and it'll make jam more viable. Secondly though, what's going to happen is that people are going to be devoid of bluffs, so they're not going to be bluffing often enough, which means that you might just want to pursue value against the sort of made hand, second best hand region of their range, like kings, ace king suited, ace king offsuit, queens, jacks, that sort of thing. On timing, I would say that when villain is really quick with their timing here, you probably want to jam, because it's just less likely that they're bluffing. Usually you have to consider for a second whether to roll a bluff with king jack suited, whether to flat this time, that kind of thing. You need to work out like where your parameters are vaguely for 4-bet bluffing. So timing and player type would have an effect here. I did just go for the standard GTO action of calling and slow playing in this node. It's basically the top EV play when you don't have a read. 8-6-5. Very good board for my range, more so than villains, because we are cut off versus button here. It's kind of a late configuration spot. Don't be fooled by the empty seat here. We could actually have all of the combos of 8, 6s and 5s, although we could flat some of those pre. I actually don't. I just play 3-bet or fold, button versus cutoff. So I can have 6s and 8s pure. I probably wouldn't have 5s all the time. I'd just be mixing that one, but I could have it. Villain doesn't have any of those hands. Meanwhile, we're the one that's likely to have 6-7, 8-7, 5-6, something like this. So really, really good board for a range, about as good a board for a range as we could ever get. Even something like 4s, 7s and 9s have extra EV than normal here against overpairs. What this means is that this play probably isn't a thing that villain is doing here, like betting all of your range small doesn't strike me as a thing in this spot. I think I would play all of my range as a check here. There's no real urgency to rush pot growth. I can protect my check and range to the max, and I can just start aggressing on the turn and river if I want to bluff or value bet there. So I wouldn't make this play personally, but it's probably not like a terrible action either. I decided here that raise was better than call. The reason for that is I felt that people were probably just going to be betting too many overpairs here and not enough bluffs if they were splitting range. And if they were range betting, I just wanted to make a small raise that could at some frequency just induce villain to do something silly. The other part of this is that I thought if the turn was a 4, a 7, a 9, something like this, that people would probably overreact, and I also wasn't convinced that people were going to aggress enough and bluff enough if I just flatted here. Thus I went for raise, which I think is slightly better than call, even though in equilibrium probably call with aces will be the #1 play. So you could call this a deviation. We got jammed on, we called, we won against jacks. I think jacks is definitely meant to jam flop here on this node, out of position, fairly vulnerable, useful fold equity, 4-bet pot. Low SPR, not much else to say. I think it's fine by both parties. I do think that pre-flop it's a very important thing to consider who you're actually up against here though, instead of just following charts. Pocket queens, we 3-bet against Berbertron, who is a reg. They 4-bet, we jam, they call, and we lose to ace king. End of hand. Exciting stuff, right? What would you guys do without exciting, strategically rich hands like that here at Carrot Corner Poker Education, the home of true EV? Ace king offsuit, and we go ahead and open. We are flatted by the same player. We're doing a load of battles with this Ruhaz, but I'm not going to put Ruhaz in the title because nobody knows who Ruhaz is, probably, or at least I don't. No offense, sir or madam, if you are in fact a famous crusher. Anyway, they played quite solidly in this session, so I have nothing but respect for the game, but I didn't know them, so I didn't put them in the title, but this is like battling Ruhaz this session. So we went for a large c-bet on this flop, which I think is totally fine. We're mixing bet and check here. Ace king has a lot of nuttiness to do with the overcards. Our pair draws are very strong here. They have a lot of implied odds associated with them, especially in later positions, so I do think just blasting this flop is fine. As is checking behind, I rolled a bet this time. Villain calls onto the 8 of diamonds turn. I think our hand is pretty far up here. If I was button, sorry, I'm actually hijack here, not cutoff, as I said. If I was button or even cutoff, this might be a pure check. I think when we're hijack though, this hand is actually further down our range than you would think. And with the king of diamonds specifically, with the blocker to their check raises, most importantly, I do think that we can bet here, and I would be going for overbets here when I do decide to bluff. I rolled this, I don't want to bet this all the time, and it's worth noting that if I didn't have a diamond here, I would actually pure check ace king, because I think it then falls into the sort of lifeless median part of our range that struggles to improve. However, when we have a bit of showdown value, but also useful blockers and a bit more sort of incentive to bet for that reason, we can kind of say yes, we do have showdown value. However, our pair draws are still pretty nutty. We have the diamond that interferes with villains continues. We unblock. Therefore, the other suits, although the ace of spades here we should note is not great. We'd rather that was a club, leaving the backdoor flush draws unblocked. But all in all, this is definitely still a fine hand to go ahead and overbet turn with. Sometimes, and we do that. The river is the 10 of hearts. I think this is a river that mainly helps our range. Villain can have pocket 10s, but we're the only one that has queen 9 suited, because queen 9 suited can't just call a turn over bet, it has to jam if it's diamonds or fold if it's one of the other suits. In theory, this player's playing solidly enough that I believe that they know that, and therefore we're the only one with that hand. We're also the only one with 9-7, though I don't think we really have 9-7. We definitely have more combos of sets. We have 4s, 3s, jacks, and 8s. We don't have 10s. What I should really do here is consider, like, is this king of diamonds actually bad on this node? And I don't think that it is, because the only king X hand that I think villain is calling turn with here containing this card is king jack or king 3, and those are not necessarily hands that will fold the river. So actually I don't think this is a negative blocker. I think what really happens here is I do block ace jack, which is a hand I want to block. I also block some hands like ace 4 of spades or ace 8 of spades or something that might want to call with set blockers. And all in all, I think this is an okay hand to bluff river with. I did not have a lot of time in this hand. I went for all in because I figured it would be a play sometimes. Villain folded, I got it through. I think this is an okay play, but I'm not sure. I just kind of panicked and didn't have time to think it through, but I think it's fine. Moving on, we have ace king, we go for a 3-bet, we get peeled, queen 9-3 is the flop against this very elegantly named player. You can see they've put a lot of effort into this beautiful screen name. They've definitely planned it out from an early point in their career, basically just knowing that they were going to have this name for 10 or 15 years, and it was very important to get it right. They've absolutely done that. Great job. There's absolutely nothing regrettable about this name. It in no way resembles that tattoo you got when you were drunk one night and wished that you'd never fucking got. Ace king, we check, and this is usually a bet that we should say here, queen 9-3. Kinda deep. The importance of queens and 9s in villain's range here both exist, although he's cut off, right? So maybe not queens, but the importance of 9s definitely goes up when we're deep here. That said, I should usually be betting this combo. I should be betting sometimes here with range, very often with this hand. The reason I don't bet is I'm also allowed to do this sometimes in check raise. I don't need to go for really big sizing. Clearly this hand with these blockers is too good to be check folding. It's also not really... It could check call, I guess, but I figured that it was either check raise or check fold for the most part here, and check fold was out, so I went for check raise. But really, the two lines I'm using here are bet, most likely, and then check raise on a more infrequent basis. But both of those plays are absolutely fine. If you think about it, we would play aces, kings, ace, queen in the same way, 9s in the same way as a check raise here sometimes. And so it's important when we do check to remember that check raise is the game plan. Villain folded, but you can't see this in the replayer. He actually did something first before he folded, and that is he threw a fish at me on PokerStars. He threw the fish that's actually part of the fishing line and the hook as well. He threw all three of those things at me. They hit me in the face. I threw a dustbin back at him. It was our trash can if you're American. And it was all fun and games. I mean, if you're going to have a name like that, you may as well throw throwables, right, as well, because it goes with the persona of you being 12 years old. Next up, we go ahead and flat the jacks on the button. We could also 3-bet, that would be fine. Same player goes ahead and checks here. We go for a bet. I think check here and bet are both okay, actually. Most people think this is a pure bet. The reason it's not a pure bet in GTO is that there are overpairs check raising you and winning massive pots from you at a large frequency here. So while by checking you do give up some protection, you don't get that protection that people care about so much, right? You're throwing that away just like you threw the trash can, he threw the fish at me. That's the throwable, but we can do with throwing away protection sometimes here. It's okay. We take a hit on the branches where a villain is checking king 9 and hits a king on the turn. That's allowed to happen. People think that's not allowed to happen. It is allowed to happen. There's no direct problem with that because there are advantages to checking. Sometimes we get a villain to bluff a hand later, like a6, that they were just folding on the flop. Maybe we get villain to essentially win a lesser pot from us than they could if we'd bet flop with a hand like aces, or if they flopped a set of 7s, then they don't win as big a pot this way if we check back. So we can check back here. That's my point. We don't this time. I just want to point out that we can. Villain calls, turn 7. I elect to bet again here. We don't have any diamonds. That's actually a good thing when we have a made value hand. Wouldn't be such a good thing if we had a hand like Queen Jack that was bluffing, because then we'd get called or raised more. Here we want to get called or raised, so it's not really a big deal. Well, at least we want to get called, and if villain's going to overbluff on the turn with the diamond combos, then we want to get raised. So we go for a bet. Villain calls again. The 8 of diamonds river, kind of interesting. Has our hand fallen down in our range enough that we should just be checking back here? Or do we continue to value bet? Have a think about it, pause the video, or don't. Just watch it if you want. It's kind of like a highlight reel. That was probably very abrupt, me telling you to do that, as if this was some educational, okay, it is educational, but you know, as if this was some like really academic, slow-paced theory video or something. If you've done that, the right answer, in my opinion, is that we should go for value again. The reason being that things like kings, aces, etc. should really be check raising either flop or turn. Note that we don't have a ton of 7x or bolts here. Bolts are hard to hit. We don't really flat 4s. Most often we 3-bet 10s pre, 7s, quad 7s is one combo. We don't have a lot of naked 7x apart from 7-8, which is only like a couple of combos, and we don't even really flat that often pre-flop. So our range is kind of capped here. I think that villain still has plenty of incentive to check raise over pairs sooner than this and doesn't have a lot of them. They should have aces like maybe sometimes, but like kings, queens, I would expect to usually check raise flop or turn. And then they have a ton of 10x, they have a lot of like 9s, they have hands like ace king, they have hands like 4-5, ace 4, they have hands like 6s, they just have all of these hands that could still be bluff catching. So I think it's definitely correct to bet river, even though some of the combos of ace king and ace queen of diamonds have just got there. We should note that the lower diamond combos are actually going to raise us on the flop or the turn, and again, not reach this node. When your opponent condenses twice like this by calling flop aggression and then turn aggression, they're just not going to have a lot of hands like flushes, because those would have bluffed at some point earlier. We got jammed on. I decided to fold here. The reason being, I'd seen this player take some really passive line earlier where they didn't make a mandatory river bluff, in my opinion. They missed the bluff that was like quite obvious to me. And therefore, if I hadn't seen that, it's very plausible that I might have just said, okay, like what's the GTO here? Let me go into the trenches and try and do battle. But there's a couple of things that make me think this is just an easy fold. The first one is that this player missed the mandatory bluff earlier. The second one is that to bluff here, you have to have got here with one diamond, and you have to be like either turning aces into a bluff with ace of diamonds that you didn't do anything with earlier, which just beats me anyway and makes no sense, it's too high up, or you've got here with like ace king, one diamond, which means you've called the flop and the turn with ace king, one diamond, which seems a bit light and a bit spewy. It's maybe plausible, but no, I think there's just too many flushes here and bolts doing this, and I just elected to fold. I think this is fine. It's a small range whatever way you look at it, but I think it's an underbluffed one. Okay, jack 10 here, we decide to peel the big blind against big stealer. We get a flop of king queen 10. This is a very strong player that likes to put people in some difficult spots by using sizes that people are not that accustomed to, such as, not this one. This one is kind of normal, I guess, half pot on the flop, although yeah, it's not one that most regs pick. Most regs go a third here. Decide to call the jack 10 this time, fine. And then on the turn we face the gargantuan bet, the bet that's going to put us outside of our comfort zone and make us make some tough decisions. I have no idea what to do. Do you guys know what to do? I don't know what to do. I still don't know what to do, and it's been hours since I played this hand. I chose to call in game because I thought, well, I still have to defend about 33% of my range here. Villain is needing 66% fold equity to break even. I still need to hit the sort of pot odds norm fold equity amount here because I don't have a massive range disadvantage like I did on the flop. So yes, I have a nut disadvantage here. Villain has more of the combos of ace jack and stuff now after I don't raise flop. They have all of the big sets. That's not to say though that their range has more equity than mine does, because they have loads of like ace x that's just bluffing here that I don't have as well. So they're polarized, I'm condensed. I think I should probably call jack 10 most of the time. If not all of the time, I guess here it's good that I don't have clubs. Is that right? Maybe not, because like I'd like to be able to hit trips without a flush getting there a bit more often. Maybe I do still want clubs in this node, or rather it's close. But anyways, all of that aside, I figured I could fold like king 5 here, I could fold queen 7 here, I had plenty of those folds. I could even fold ace 10 or queen 9 or something with a gutter. What I didn't think I could fold is pair on the board that's blocking sets and blocking straights and has open end or redraw. I didn't think I could fold this, so I didn't fold it. The river came the 9, but it was the 9 of clubs, and the agony continues. Big Steeler goes for this sizing, not quite all in. Having just made a straight at this point, I thought, maybe villain can be value betting other straights, especially with a club blocker. maybe villain can be bluffing with just like the ace of clubs and nothing else. I mean, they have opened in the cutoff, so there's some offsuit aces, but there's not many. Yeah, they just kind of have to have like ace-x suited here to be bluffing, which I think is plausible, and I think Big Steel is a good enough player that they're capable of bluffing for the sizing here in this spot. I guess I don't love the fact that I have a 10 anymore, because no longer is villain value betting sets. The fact I have a jack is still good, obviously, because it does block ace-jack. But I think most of villain's value bets here are going to be ace-jack and flushes. There might just be some naked jack-x as well, but I suspect that should probably check on the 9 of clubs river. Yeah, I don't know. This is close. I figure it's probably like really indifferent. I ended up calling because I had no time, and villain had this hand, which does make sense, like the ace-x with the club. Very, very good hand to bluff. Very well played by my opponent. It's possible that my hand shouldn't call river, I don't know. I figured it should, because I just have a lot of 2-pair that are way worse to call without blocking any straights at all. So I figured like if I'm going to land here with like king 10, queen 10, things like king 9 maybe, and stuff like that, I should just be folding all of those. But I do have a lot of flushes here after I call turn, no question. I have a lot of like king x of clubs. That's why villain sizing is so good, by the way. I do make the nuts a lot, so like jamming is not super great here, especially for a hand that doesn't have the ace of clubs. So if lots of my turn calls are things like ace of clubs x and king of clubs x, and then like hands like straights, which are probably meant to mix a good amount of fold now, this size probably is really good theoretically. I wonder if in practice people just don't fold enough here with their straights, and then like villain's play loses or something. Certainly I stationed here. I don't know if I should. It's a really interesting spot. I suspect my hand is at best a mix. I felt really indifferent in game. I guess the reason I decided to call was just that I knew I was against a player that's capable of bluffing in spots where probably a lot of people aren't. But yeah, interesting one. King 9, and we go for a call here. This hand was really painful. I kind of regret a lot about the way I played this. This player went for half pot on the flop into 3 people. Already this kind of fills me with a slight bit of disdain or dread or something. I'm just kind of like not in love with this spot. I'm not really a fan. That said, I think we have to peel one at 3-1. On the turn here, this is where if this bet was a little bigger, or this player didn't look quite as spewy, they actually look a little bit loose aggressive pre-flop, like 35-21 over 101 hands. I feel like I may have just folded here automatically, but I decided to peel again, which on this card I don't actually love. Like a lot of stuff is getting there. They need to be really quite spewy here to be bluffing. Like they need to have like 7s or something that bet flop and then be merging again. I think this turn call is bad. I think this is just a fold and quite a clear fold. They pot the river. This is a grim spot. With top 2, I figured, okay, maybe now I can beat like some 2-pair or something, but I think I have pretty close to a bluff catcher, and against pot this isn't even so clear. And yeah, I just kind of hate the way I played this hand. I feel like folding river is actually not that far out of the question, and folding turn is kind of mandatory here, and I just kind of overreacted to a small HUD sample here and basically decided that villain was likely doing a lot of stuff that not that many people would really do. Of course, they could still be bluffing. They could have like hearts or just some random hand that started bluffing twice, and it's possible. But I think I reacted in the way that's justified if you have a bigger sample on someone and you know that they're like kind of a maniac. But I didn't really have the data to back that up here, and I kind of acted as if I did, and I think that's where I went wrong in this hand. I don't like the turn call at all. I think the river is close now, and it's not totally improbable that like we're beating some slow played aces, ace king 6-4, sometimes something like that. Maybe they have king 9, like same hand as we do, stuff like this. Maybe they're even like value betting like a slow played ace king or king queen or something still. Although I don't think so for this sizing. That said, our range is kind of capped here and it wouldn't shock me. So I think the river call is fine, but like not happy, but the turn call is probably bad. But what we don't want to do is fall into the trap of being like, I lost, therefore I must come up with a reason why I lost and berate myself. You know, it doesn't work that way. 5s, we call here, villain checks flop, we decide to check back this time, we actually make a set here. We decide to bet, they raise, and we call. We could definitely consider 3-betting turn here, but against this sizing, it's a bit odd. Like, okay, villain could maybe have an overpair that they're check raising here. It's definitely possible. They can have a ton of draws that they're check raising, and the fold equity, therefore, that we're getting on double flush draw is really useful. So actually, I think 3-betting here could be a pure play and something I missed. I did have a hand going on in the other table. The flush got there in the river, villain checked. I figured now we probably just wanted to go for some kind of value, but upon like actually having more time to think about this, and again, a lot of these hands were played with like no time on my clock, I'm kind of like, well, what are we actually doing here? Like, okay, villain could have like ace 9, villain could maybe have something like, what ace x bluff, like ace 6, ace 8, ace x of hearts, like something like this that could call. Yeah, I guess there are enough hands that can pay off here. They could be slow playing a flush sometimes, they could be like taking a weird scared line with a straight sometimes, even though they shouldn't. Because they look like a reg, I kind of discounted them having a hand like a straight or a flush that frequently here. But you never know. I think this is really close. Like, I don't actually hate checking behind here. I went for the greedy value bet and paid the price for it. But then again, if you're never value towning yourself against hands like this, you're probably not value betting thinly enough. Very weird spot. Overall, I decided there were enough hands like kings, queens, jacks, ace x of hearts, etc. to pair 9-7 going on here that I could still go for value. But I do think it's somewhat close. But I think the value bet's okay. Okay, king 8 here. Blind versus blind, villain goes for the 3x, and we're mixing a bit of 3-bet bluff and a bit of call here. Either play is going to be okay. Villain checks, we go for this bet, and villain calls. The turn comes 8 of diamonds, they check, and we go for an overbet. I was contemplating whether I wanted to play big bet or overbet here, but I decided that if I just value bet something like king queen plus of this node, maybe king jack, then it wouldn't really be too thin, because villain's meant to check raise a lot of ace king plus on the flop or bet themselves. So actually this bet would be fine with a range of king jack plus for value and then bluffs. It's not ideal that we block some of the calls here, but we still unblock plenty of draws, 10x, etc. So I think this sizing is warranted partially because we just really want to open the action with strong value bets and bluffs here, and also because it's double flush draw, and therefore the bigger we go, the closer we make villain's draws to being indifferent. So we go for this sizing, villain calls, and then on the river I decide to size down a bit. This is mainly just because of my blockers. I'm blocking a king and blocking an 8. This relies on a bit more call from like the 1-pair region, so I decided to go for this sizing. Villain does call, and they make a call with a king 4 of clubs here, which seems reasonable. This hand is possibly one of the most entertaining, although it's not a particularly instructive one. So villain is 49-9 here. They look like a real recreational player, don't know much else. We go for an open, they call, and they lead as an overbet. This is not a thing. That doesn't make it horrible necessarily, it just means that it's not a thing you ever see, and it's not a thing theoretically either, and I don't even think you want to or can build a strategy around this in game theory. That said, villain has done it, so it's not particularly useful for us to sit here and say, that's not a thing. I actually hate it when people are analysing hands, you know, those poker nerds you get, those GTO nerds, and they're like, oh, this isn't a thing, so I should just automatically win all of his money because it's not a thing. It doesn't work that way. Like, just because it's not a thing doesn't mean that you don't still have to put your brain into gear here and come up with the right solution. What is the right solution? Okay, well, when someone who is 49-9, who has thus far been very placid, decides to just wake up and do this, it's usually not because they have nothing, right? So think about it. Deductive logic time. If villain was the type of person to just overbet lead the flop with nothing, that would mean that villain is the type of person to not run 49-9. Because probably they do weird shit all over the place, and a lot of that trickles down to pre-flop, and I would have seen like some kind of other aggression from this player by now. Therefore, it's very likely that this player has a merged range, meaning that they have something, quite a lot. That doesn't have to be something amazing, but it should be something. And it basically means that they have a lot of draws. They have like the 2-pair that I'm coolering, the top pair that I'm coolering, the 8x of clubs that I'm coolering. I keep using the word coolering, I hate that word. Coolering, terrible word. But the idea is that they just have a lot of hands that are going to invest a ton of money. I could call here. The issue is that there are quite a lot of turn cards that will cause a generally placid player to stop going nuts here. I also don't think that they have a hand like King Jack of Spades, or a hand like Ace 4 of Diamonds, or something that's just absolute trash. So given that I think villain's range contains really good stuff quite a lot, draws quite a lot, and pairs quite a lot, I just decided to fast play here, ignore the fact that like GTO will do less raising against this, and just decide to raise. So I go for this, villain calls, the old stop and go, waiting for the safe turn, right, and then jamming. That works really well if you put your opponent on squarely a flush draw, which will raise your bet all the time on the flop and then check behind on the turn if you check but fold to this, or make a mistake by paying it off if you shove the turn. If all of that is true, then villain has owned my soul. Unfortunately for villain, my range contains overpairs, sets, 2-pair. In fact, if I had a flush draw on the flop, I don't even think I would ever raise, because I wouldn't trust this player not to just 3-bet in my face with some kind of set or 2-pair or something, and I'd be very like terrified of reopening. So actually, My true range here is probably just sets and overpairs and stuff like that. I'm never bluffing on the flop here, obviously exploitatively that'd be a bad idea. So this player has completely owned themselves by using this stop and go jam turn strategy. I feel like when people do this, they're like almost putting you squarely on some kind of draw. There's no reason to do that. If you're a beginner, you're a fairly new poker player, look out for this leak in your own game. Do you ever like obsess about draws and put your opponents on this? Not accusing any of you watching this to do this play here. I don't think anyone would that's watching this. I think you guys are all way too sophisticated. Apart from you, villain, you're watching this too, right? You did this. The proof is on the video, it's right here on your screen. You can't hide it. But everyone else, like I know you wouldn't commit this kind of level of atrocity, but you would probably still take some abominable lines due to some bad thought processes in some other spots that do place too much emphasis on your opponent having exactly one type of hand. So I'm not saying this is definitely why villain took this play, but it could well be, and it's something to bear in mind. Hope you guys have enjoyed this fast run through video. One final reminder that Cash Injection is going live this Friday the 16th of December 2022. It'll be live on carrotcorner.com. That's our exploitative 10 episode long course on how to get a massive boost to your win rate by basically adapting your game with 10 simple and absolutely powerful exploits. You can pick that up at Carrot Corner if you haven't already. In the meantime, do smash that like button. Let me know what you think about the video. Let me know what you think about the fly through Fast and Furious review format. Do you prefer it to deep diving? Would you like it all the time? Would you just like it sometimes? All of this feedback helps me. Would you like to never see it again? All of this is useful. Let me know, and I'll see you guys on another video very soon here at Carrot Corner. Bye for now.